Okay, so today I'm going to do something about civic education, and since this terrible killing of a man killing his lover or ex-girlfriend, it's moved a lot of people. Italy is very up in arms, and I think I've got a lot to say on this subject, which is about relationships, probably one of the most important aspects to our lives, are relationships. And we often don't understand what is a healthy relationship, what is love, and what is not love, what is completely the opposite to love, dependency. So today we're going to talk about love. Now, first of all, I want to just mention the fact that there's different types of love. You've got romantic love, which we're going to talk a lot about. And then you've got motherly love, which is conditional love, where the mother always loves, no matter how the son or daughter behaves or what they're like, or whatever state they're in. They'd always be accepted and validated and loved by the mother. Then you've got fatherly love, which is about discipline and whether they behave themselves, and then if they do, the father will love them. If they don't, he won't. Then brotherly love, which is a kind of solidarity and identification with somebody, etc. There's probably lots more if we could think of more, but those are the different types of love. But what we concern ourselves really is romantic love. Now, I looked at two very important psychiatrists, one really famous and the other very famous in America, but probably one that has the best quote on love and what it is. So Erich Fromm is the one that's very classic, and his idea of love is a decision. It is a judgment, it is a promise. If love were only a feeling, there would be no basis for the promise to love each other forever. A feeling comes and it may go. How can I judge that it will stay forever when my act does not involve judgment and decision? So he's talking about the marriage vows there, and his idea is, love isn't a feeling. It produces feelings, maybe, but it's not a feeling. It's an act, and it's a decision. So if we look at Scott Peck, actually has something which I think really tries to break down what love is. And he says, love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. So we're not just talking about loving another, but also ourselves. Remember, the Bible says we must love our neighbour as ourselves. And we can't actually love another without loving ourselves. Loving another without loving ourselves is just creating a symbiotic dependency, which we will look at. And spiritual growth, he's talking about our development. So love is as love does. Love is an act of will, namely both intention and an action. Will also implies choice. We do not have to love, we choose to love. So, they're both very into the practicalities of love. In fact, The Art of Loving, written by Erich Fromm, talked a lot about how love was an act and a decision. Really, it was something which we can develop and practice and get better at. In fact, it's an ability, he said. So we're going to look a little bit closely at these things. Now, romantic love. This is the problematic love. According to Freud, it's madness. It's a type of madness because we don't actually see the other person as they really are. When we're in love, we really are deceived by chemicals and hormones and testosterone and all these things going on inside us. We don't see the reality, so it's a kind of madness. We only see them as a perfect specimen. We only see the positive. Even if they have a ridiculous laugh that's really stupid, we will see it as just funny and just kind of endearing and not in a negative way. So this romantic love can really cover your eyes to the reality. Normally it lasts 2 years, and then we could last a bit less, could last a bit longer, but we will eventually see through, start seeing reality, start seeing the person as they really are, and maybe they're things the things which made us see them so positively might start looking like weaknesses. You know, that laugh we found funny will start looking really irritating. But in this moment, normally we need to decide, do we want to stay with this person? Because then we will understand, can we live together and become more and more unified to a project, maybe start a family, buy a house with this person? Are they good conversations? Do they make us laugh? Do we have a lot in common? Or are they very irritating? Do they get on our nerves and, you know, make us feel not like wanting to be with them? So, you know, once we've fallen out of love, could be the dangerous part of the relationship in terms of, will it continue? Because we are capable of building a life with this person and really uniting our lives, unifying our lives. A romantic love does feel very nice, because often romantic love is when you're young, when you've become independent from your parents, so you start feeling a bit insecure about yourself and your identity, because you feel more alone. And this romantic love, with romantic, you can go beyond the persona, that kind of image we put on to show the world who we are. Maybe we try to pretend to be a really strong person or really funny person, but underneath we feel very weak or very sad. But we can really go beyond that and really show who we are to the other, and they adore it and they love it and they think it's wonderful, and that feels really good. We go beyond the emotional and physical limits with sexual activity. It's beyond the physical limits, and we show who we are, and they seem to be really excited by it, and it really makes them alive and wake up. And so that feels really good without your mask, your esteem. So you get a lot of self-esteem, you get a strong positive validation for your identity, you feel serene with yourself. All the doubts you had about yourself are going, and you know, that feels good, but it lasts about 2 years, and then reality strikes. But we must distinguish between dependency and love, because they're not the same. If we can't love ourselves, if we don't love ourselves, we can't really love, because what happens is we attach ourselves to somebody else. We think of their needs, we don't think of our needs, we just think of their needs, and they're thinking of their needs too. So we become part of them, and we no longer exist, and then we kind of are self-cancelling. So we are not loving somebody, we are actually trying to be part of them, and they may be doing the same, just cancelling who we are. And that is not love, that's dependency. But it can also, and we call that a symbiotic attachment. But it can also happen through sadomasochistic dynamics where, you know, you're treated badly, rejected, and then you go back and try to improve, thinking you've got to resolve this, you've got to get the satisfaction of feeling accepted, and maybe you're treated badly again, and then you go back for more, and it becomes a bit of an addiction. And maybe sometimes they do accept you just to keep this dynamic going, just to keep you coming back, because they're the sadist and you're the masochist, and they keep this, but it never leads to satisfaction. It's always unresolved. It's always feeling like anger and not actually completing this process. A lot of this can go through the courting phase at the beginning when you're establishing rules. It's not that a little bit of this is part of the play of romantic love, isn't it? But you don't want it to get too much of a toxic relationship where it's just destructive. It's just there to destroy self-esteem and identity, and become a symbiotic relationship. So, you know, you have to be careful with this. A lot of people are confused about what is love and what is dependency. They don't really recognize, they think they're in love, but what actually they're practicing is dependency, and it won't go anywhere. It will just lead to stormy relationships and maybe painful separations. Or just stormy relationships until the end. You know, no separation, but just continued storms. But it's not a kind of love that's healthy, that builds, that nurtures us, if you like. In the courting phase, we're in the beginning phase, we're establishing the rules, and that can be the painful part, because you've got, you know, they're implicit rules. They're not rules you dictate to each other, but you're trying out codes of behavior and at the same time trying to build trust. You know, the rules might be you can go and see other girls or other boys, but not go for a romantic dinner with them, or you can slow dance with other men, but you know, or maybe you can't, or when you come in, you mustn't ignore me, things like that, or Sundays are for us. You know, these can be implicit rules that we establish. Maybe if every Sunday we spend time again and suddenly we don't, you've broken the implicit rule, and maybe she or he will be very angry and they won't talk about it. But, you know, maybe they won't talk about it. In the courting phase, you don't want to let out too much of who you are because it makes you vulnerable. So maybe you hide that, but it will lead to a bit of tension and a bit of pain. Bit of a painful phase, but also a beautiful phase because you're exploring diversity of the other person and the mystery of another person. You know, we can never really understand another person fully. We're maybe by becoming more and more of a close relationship, we're finding a lot about another person and about ourselves, and maybe, you know, it's a wonderful process too. But but it is a growth process. It's a growth process. We start as babies as completely narcissistic, totally absorbed with our own needs, not thinking about anyone else, totally selfish. As we grow, as we mature, we can think of others until we are fully matured. You know, a parent will actually sacrifice for their kids. You will start to think of others more and more. So the more we can think of others, the more we can love. We can really, narcissism, really for a narcissist, their reality is always according to, you know, what's their needs, their fears and their pleasure is the only thing that's important. Whereas to love means to really, recognize that someone's different, and to feel their pain, and to have empathy, and to really come out of your egoism. With narcissism, you create a dependency because the other doesn't exist. And love is really creating bonds with someone else, not that isn't you, and you're able to think of somebody else and be selfless. Marriage is one of the ingredients to a successful marriage is don't be selfish. If you really don't think of each other, it's going to be hard. Yes, if you think of your own needs, it's going to be a lot of friction, and it's going to be difficult. If you are managing to think of both your needs, I think of myself and my wife, and she does the same, then you will build mutual gain in your project. So it's quite important. This is a growth process. Some people are not ready, they're too selfish, they're too young to love, and maybe they will just create dependencies. The beauty of a relationship is the diversity. There's a famous book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, where the man is seen as so different from the woman. An example being, if a man has a hard day at work, he comes home and he wants to go in his cave. He doesn't want to see anyone else. He just wants to play with the computer or go and fix the car and just read, whatever, be on his own. He doesn't want to talk about it. A woman is the opposite. She'll want to share her pain, and she'll want to talk about it and feel the solidarity of another person. So the big problem is when the wife comes home and she's had a hard day, the husband thinks, well, maybe she needs to be on her own for a bit, and then the friction starts. Or maybe he comes home and she thinks he wants to talk about it, so she asks him lots of questions. He's just trying to politely say, look, just leave me alone, I need to be on my own. And she doesn't understand, thinking he needs to talk about it. And that shows how this diversity can cause lots of friction, but it's a journey of discovery too, isn't it? Now, the big problem is in the separation. Like I said, when romantic love finishes, or even before it's finished, maybe there's a moment of crisis where the other person, or even you, decide to separate, and that will entail a loss, and you will have to go through grieving. And that is a difficult process to go through, depending how long and how deep the relationship's gone. If it's gone for 2 years, then maybe you're going to have to let go a lot of a lot of stuff. I had a girlfriend when I was at university, and we lived together for 2 years, and then after living together we moved after university. We still lived together for 1 year, and then we split up because she became very religious, and I just, it wasn't for me. But it was very painful. I knew I didn't want it, but it was very painful, especially as all her friends were my friends, and I was letting go of all my university experiences, etc., and all the times we had together. And that means going through this process. And with grieving, you've got denial. You've got the moment where you're saying, oh, I don't know, this is ridiculous. We built up all this together, and we can't just throw it away, and we can make it through, and this is just a bad week, and we'll get over it next week, it'll look better. And we're denying that it's over. And then we get angry. We say, we've built up all this and you've destroyed it, and for this I'm really angry. And then you get the depression, and that's a moment of emptying, emptying of all that. So you've got to go through this depression to really be able to start again. You've got to empty, let go. This is a moment of letting go and emptying of what you're letting go. And that is tough, it's hard. But then you need to reinvent yourself, and then you should get renewal. So, you know, with me, I decided to become a teacher. I started a course. I moved to another city. I set another path, made other friends, and went around with the older friends. And in the end, I experienced this renewal, and I felt fantastic for it. And I'm really glad that I took that leap out of the relationship, because it wouldn't have worked very well. It would have just been later on that things collapse. So the renewal, to get to that renewal, is really important. Now, maybe, I don't know what happened with this man that killed his ex-fiancée. A psychologist said it was because his mother had never said no to him. She wrote that in La Stampa, but I can see he was obviously not be able to handle a relationship, or the end of a relationship, maybe rejection, the pain of rejection, and go through depression. And I can see that being the cause of this, horrendous act, the depression. To avoid, we do try to avoid legitimate suffering. This is the avoidance of legitimate suffering leads to neuroticism, Jung said, and that avoiding legitimate suffering, which is the depression, could be alcohol, it could be drugs. People take all sorts of things to try to avoid the pain of grieving, and I've known people for 20 years getting drunk and losing their job. For 20 years they haven't worked, and still don't work, and are still drunk, and they've never got over a relationship. So it's quite powerful stuff. Suicide is possible. The most romantic relationship in literature is Romeo and Juliet, and they both committed suicide, or one committed suicide and the other one killed herself, or killed himself. Then that could it's very dangerous stuff if you're not going to face the legitimate suffering. It can lead to horrific acts. Destroy the other. That's what this guy did, and his way of avoiding this suffering was to destroy the other. And in his mind, for him, it would have meant there's no one to grieve, because they don't exist. So he hasn't lost her. This is where it can go. So it's a danger. Now, ways of getting through grieving would be expressing your grief, talking about it with somebody, crying. You need to express this, not too much. Don't exaggerate. Otherwise, you've got to be able to express extreme grief and then move on, which means absorbing yourself in other activity. I got very absorbed in reading about certain things, and maybe sports, music. These things have a very healthy way of needing concentration and effort and not focusing, but you really need to let go, and that's quite often we don't want to let go. The thought of letting go is quite painful for us, so it is a decision too, and it might feel strange too, moving on, a bit artificial because you don't want to, but you really need to make a choice, and then eventually you'll get to the renewal phase, and hopefully grow from it.